Imagine you're in a village by a fire, no radio, no newspapers, no internet. And suddenly, an old griot raises his hand, and within a couple of hours, people hundreds of kilometers away know that the ruler has died, that a caravan loaded with gold has been robbed, that a war will begin. How? You think, well, a messenger on a fast horse. But what if I tell you that sometimes information jumped through chains faster than a letter in medieval Europe reached the neighboring county? Drums that speak in phrases, whistling that carries a person's name further than you could shout, marks made of knots, archive songs that encode taxes, genealogy, and gossip. And yes, there were fake news and censorship, one wrong beat on the membrane, and an entire village prepares weapons in vain. Whoever controlled sound controlled power. Want to know how one rhythm could cause panic, while another melody could stop blood? Stay tuned. We're about to uncover the invisible communication network that existed before wires. Let's go! When Europeans first encountered African communication systems, they couldn't believe their ears. Literally. Imagine a colonial official planning a secret operation, and by evening, villages 100 kilometers away already know about it. Magic? Spies? No, just a system refined over millennia, a system that worked when our ancestors were still learning to send pigeons with notes. Let's start with the most famous, talking drums. This is not just an instrument for rhythm, it's a real language. In West Africa, the Yoruba people used dundun drums that could imitate the tonality of human speech. Sounds fantastic? Meanwhile, it's the pure truth. The Yoruba language is tonal. The same word pronounced with different intonations has different meanings, and drummers learn to convey these tones through beats. Imagine you're sitting in your hut, and suddenly you hear a special drum rhythm. For the uninitiated, just music. For you, a message. Strangers are approaching from the north, armed with spears, about 20 people, and all this without a single word, only through rhythm and tone. Impressive, isn't it? Now imagine that such messages could be transmitted over a distance of up to 10 kilometers and then picked up by the next drummer and sent further. In Cameroon and Congo, they used slit drums, hollow logs with a slot, which were struck with sticks. The sound of such drums was so powerful that on a quiet night it could be heard 15 kilometers away. Europeans called this system the forest telegraph, and for good reason. The speed of information transmission sometimes exceeded the speed of a horse. But drums are just the beginning. In the mountainous regions of West Africa, people communicated by whistling. Yes, ordinary whistling, only modulated in a special way. The Bobo people in modern Burkina Faso developed an entire whistling language that allowed messages to be transmitted across valleys and gorges. Imagine you're working in a field, and suddenly you hear a special trill. For an outsider, just a bird's whistle. For you, a signal that lions have been spotted on the neighboring hill. And you need to be alert. But in Ethiopia and Sudan, they used something quite unusual. Horns made from hollow gourds or animal horns. The sound of such a horn, low and prolonged, could spread over vast distances in the savanna. Each message had its own code, a certain number of beeps with a certain interval. 3 short, 2 long. Enemy is near. 1 long, 3 short. Gather for council. A simple system, but incredibly effective. Now let's talk about griots, keepers of oral tradition in West Africa. These are not just storytellers, they are living archives, living news feeds. A griot could memorize and transmit a genealogy counting hundreds of names, the history of a people over several centuries, laws and customs, and all this without a single record, only through oral transmission. When a griot traveled from village to village, he not only entertained people with stories, but also spread news. There's a new ruler in the kingdom of Mali. Merchants from the coast have brought strange metal objects. The neighboring village has an unprecedented harvest. Information was passed from mouth to mouth, from griot to griot, creating an invisible news network covering vast territories. And you know what's most amazing? Accuracy. Researchers comparing griots' oral histories with archaeological data were often struck by their coincidence. How is this possible? The fact is that griots had special mnemonic techniques: rhythm, rhyme, melody, which helped to memorize huge amounts of information without distortion. Plus a cross-checking system. Griots regularly gathered together and compared their versions of stories. But news in Africa wasn't transmitted by sound alone. In eastern and southern Africa, smoke signals were used. This was especially common in the savanna, where smoke can be seen from afar. Different types of smoke, white, black, intermittent, thick, meant different messages. Imagine you're herding cattle, you look up and see 3 columns of black smoke on the horizon, and you immediately understand the neighboring village has been attacked. You need to prepare for defense. And in forest areas where smoke isn't visible through the treetops, they used fire. No, not bonfires, but special torches that were waved in a certain way. This was a real light alphabet, a predecessor of modern light signals at sea. In North Africa, especially in the Sahara Desert, where sound and smoke can be useless due to wind and distances, Tuaregs and other nomadic peoples developed a system of marks. Stones arranged in a certain way, notches on trees, knots on ropes. All these were messages for those who knew how to read them. There is water here. This oasis is occupied by a hostile tribe. A caravan passed here 3 days ago, heading east. Particularly interesting is the knot-writing system, similar to Peruvian quipu. In some regions of Africa, ropes with knots were used not only for transmitting messages, but also for accounting. The number of cattle, the size of tribute, the number of warriors. All this could be recorded in knots, and a messenger carrying such a rope might not even know what exactly he was transmitting. A kind of information protection. But let's return to drums, because they deserve special attention. Did you know that the drum language was so developed that it could convey not only simple messages, but also complex concepts, jokes, even poetry? In some regions of Congo, drummers could speak entire stories that listeners understood, as well as if they were told in words. And here's what else is interesting. The drum language was both public and secret at the same time. Public because anyone could hear it. Secret because only those who knew the code could understand it. It's as if you were shouting a message in a square, but only the chosen ones could understand its meaning. The perfect system for transmitting important information in conditions where spies or enemies might be around. Now imagine this. You are a tribal chief, and you have access to this invisible communication network. You can learn news faster than others, transmit orders over vast distances, coordinate the actions of your people. That's real power, isn't it? That's why in many African societies, drummers had special status, were often close to rulers, or even belonged to royal families. But every system has its vulnerabilities. What if the drummer makes a mistake? What if he deliberately transmits false information? History knows many cases when incorrectly transmitted messages led to conflicts or even wars. Therefore, there were strict rules and checks. Important messages were often duplicated, special confirmation phrases were used, and deliberate distortion of information could be severely punished. Interestingly, when Europeans began to colonize Africa, they quickly realized the power of these communication systems. And what did they do? Right, they tried to control or ban them. In some colonies, bans were introduced on the use of drums without permission from the authorities. Why? Because the colonizers feared that uprisings would be coordinated through drums, and they were right. That's exactly what happened. But it's impossible to ban a language that has existed for millennia. Drums continued to speak, only their messages became even more encoded. New rhythms appeared, new meanings, understandable only to the initiated. Colonial authorities could stand next to a drummer and not understand that he was actually transmitting a call to resistance. And what happened when different communication systems met? For example, when peoples with drum tradition contacted those who used smoke signals. Amazing hybrid systems emerged. A drum message could be translated into a smoke signal. that into a whistling language, and so on. Information could travel vast distances, crossing various landscapes and cultural boundaries. It's especially impressive how these systems adapted to new realities. When Europeans came to Africa with their writing and technologies, local communication systems didn't disappear, but evolved. The drum language began to include new concepts: gun, ship, paper. Griots began telling stories about strange, pale-faced people with thunder sticks. Smoke signals warned of approaching colonial detachments. And even today, in the era of smartphones and the internet, many of these traditional communication systems are still alive. In some regions of West Africa, drums are still used to transmit important news: births, deaths, invitations to ceremonies. Griots still travel from village to village, telling stories and spreading news. Only now they can record their performances on a smartphone and upload them to YouTube. What can we learn from this today? Perhaps an understanding that communication is not just technology, it's culture, it's art. African information transmission systems weren't just functional, they were beautiful. Drum speech was poetic, griot stories were captivating, smoke signals were visually impressive. Information wasn't just transmitted, it was experienced. And one more important lesson: true communication will always find a way to overcome obstacles. Whether it's dense forests, endless deserts, or bans by colonial authorities, people always found a way to convey what's important. Maybe this is worth remembering in our era of censorship, blockages, and information wars. So, let's summarize. African communication systems were incredibly diverse and effective. Drums, whistling, horns, smoke signals, knot writing, the oral tradition of griots. They allowed information to be transmitted over vast distances, overcoming natural barriers. They were simultaneously public and secret, simple and complex. They were an integral part of power and governance, and many of them have survived to this day, adapting to new realities. What do you think about these amazing systems? Could we borrow something from them today? Perhaps in a world where we are constantly monitored through our own devices, it's worth remembering simpler and uncontrolled ways of communication. Write in the comments which of these communication systems impressed you the most, and why. If you enjoyed this journey into the world of African communications, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss new episodes. Because next time we'll go to a place where every stone holds secrets, where an ordinary pattern can tell the story of an entire dynasty, and where, well, let's not reveal all the cards. I'll just say that it will be no less fascinating. And meanwhile, listen. Perhaps somewhere in the distance, a drum is sounding, transmitting a message through the centuries. We are here. We remember. We continue to speak. Until next time.